Hello YouTube, this is Adam Noyes of Van Productions, and welcome to this review of an interesting film. If by interesting you mean kind of utterly boring at parts, extremely stupid, but yet at the same time I can't help but kind of like it. Yeah, well, we'll let that decide on. I don't really know how to... I got kind of obsessed with this film, The Swarm. Released in 1978, directed by Irwin Allen. Did a lot of research about the film. Normally, when I do a review, of course it's a movie that I've seen before in the past, but I usually just watch it once and then take notes on it. Or like rewatch it once and then take notes on it. Here, I watched this movie twice. All 2 hours and 35 minutes and 15 seconds worth of it. I watched it twice. I have a lot of notes. Usually I have notes that I take in order to talk about, or, you know, like key talking points. Yeah, I have, usually that goes anywhere from 3 to 5 pages. I have 10 for this film. So I don't really know how long this is going to be, because a lot of this goes into something that I'm going to bring in a little later as a little treat. But there's a lot of shit I want to talk about. The first thing I want to really talk about is the director, Irwin Allen. Irwin, I love you. I really do. He had a very large passion for film. He always loved making film, and he loved disaster movies. He just loved the appeal of them. He was just that kind of person. In many respects, he was the Michael Bay before Michael Bay, except if Michael Bay was good. You see, he had a problem in the 70s, and that is he thought that all movies should be action-packed and have big stars. In order for them to make a lot of money, they needed to have a lot of names. They needed to have a lot of action in it. That kind of bit him in the ass with this film, mainly because the year prior to this, 1977, Star Wars was released, and Star Wars had hardly any big actors in it. I mean, it did, like Alec Guinness and Peter Cushing, but it had hardly any, for the leads, had hardly any known actors in it. And yet it was a huge, huge hit. And that baffled Irwin Allen. It did. Irwin Allen said that he didn't understand why such a movie would be successful. And this film was a humongous bomb when it was released, The Swarm. It was released as a double bill along with his other film, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which he also directed. And Beyond the Poseidon Adventure is a sequel to his previous film, The Poseidon Adventure, which is actually a really good movie. It's really fun and full of great characters. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about The Swarm. And this film had a big budget. It did. Its budget was actually a little bit bigger than Star Wars. It only made $7 million back. That's a lot of money that he was shortfalled. And Irwin Allen was always bitter that this film was not successful, because this was actually, I believe, Irwin Allen's favorite movie that he made. That he liked how it came out the best was this film. And he was baffled that it didn't make that money back. In fact, that he refused to talk about the movie after it was released, because he was so disappointed with the fact that it bombed. He both felt like he let us down, and he felt like he let himself down, which was why he became the bitter man that he wound up becoming in the 80s. Which is too bad, because I believe Irwin Allen has some genuine talent with him. His film, oh god, that just got really bright. His film, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which he directed, I believe is a fantastic film. It's fun, it's got fun characters, it's just a fun film. And I think he's genuinely got talent. And he's an excellent producer. The Towering Inferno, for example, that movie got nominated for Best Picture. Fantastic producer. But not only was this film a bomb, the lead in this movie is played by Michael Caine, who is a phenomenal actor. And he's gone on to say this several times in many interviews, that this is by far the worst film he's ever done. Oh, that takes talent. For all the films Michael Caine is in, Jaws: The Revenge, for example, he says that it's the worst. He says that The Swarm, is the worst film he's ever done. Yeah, that says something. And not only did he feel that this is the worst film he ever done, but a lot of critics, when this film was released, went on to say that this is one of, if not the worst film ever made. I don't really agree with that. I agree that this movie is bad. Don't get me wrong. This movie is bad. But it's not that bad. I have seen a lot worse than this, both in production values and in acting and in music, and there are some very competent things in this film. So people calling it the worst film ever made, I strongly disagree with. But don't get me wrong, it's bad. I'll be honest, I enjoy this kind of like The Green Slime. Everybody knows, who follows my channel, that I adore that film because of how bad it is. It's a case of it being so bad it's good. This is another case of that. I enjoy this movie because of how bad it is. Like, I have a great time watching it because of that. I know a lot of people get bored with this, or get bored with this film, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. And one thing that always struck me with this film, I remember watching it when I was a little kid on Sci-Fi before it turned to Sci-Fi, and I remember the concept terrifying me, because recently I was stung by a bee, and then this movie was on, and I was terrified. And I'll be honest, the concept itself is a terrifying one. And this film gets criticized a lot for having a very stupid-ass concept, and the concept literally is, there is a humongous swarm of African killer bees that are just wreaking havoc in Texas. That concept sounds silly. A lot of people that have reviewed it on YouTube, and a lot of people who reviewed it, like critic-wise, said that that is one of the stupidest concepts ever. It's not. It really isn't. You have no idea how terrifying that would be if there was a gigantic, angry swarm of killer bees out there just saying, fuck you to us, and just killing everybody. No mercy whatsoever. Especially those kind of bees where they can sting you more than once. Because most bees, when they sting you, they pull out the stinger and they die. No, African killer bees, I believe, at least that's what I remember hearing on Animal Planet, is that they can sting you multiple times. That's terrifying. I mean, it's kind of like the locusts. I mean, locusts are just little animals too, but look what they did in the Midwest during the Great Depression. It was awful. I believe this concept is absolutely terrifying. Not just because I'm a little afraid of bees, but it just frightens me, and I never really understood why people criticized it so much. But that's just me. If you think it's completely stupid and retarded, go ahead. It's fine. And there's also two cuts of the film. When it was theatrically released in 1978, the film was a little under 2 hours. It was 118 minutes. But the version that I watched, and the version that is now released on DVD and is shown on television, is 2.5 hours long. They actually inserted, it's actually longer than that. They inserted 40 minutes of missing footage. And I just wanted to tell you that I'm talking about this 2.5 hour cut. This 2.5 hour cut is the one that is genuinely known now. And boy, you can tell what was cut out of the theatrical version and what was reinserted, because all the stuff that was reinserted into the film isn't necessary. It's fluff. It could be cut out of the film and no one would give a shit. And it's blatantly obvious, especially with a couple of the side plots. There's this love triangle in there that's thrown in there. There's this pregnant woman character that's thrown in there. Doesn't progress the plot whatsoever. There's a lot of these tiny character moments for characters that wind up not serving anything with the plot whatsoever, which I had mixed feelings about. I mean, a lot of it I don't like because it just stalls the action and just kind of, it's a hiccup. What it does, it's kind of like a hiccup in the middle. It's like if you're giving this grand speech like what I'm doing right now and you have a hiccup, it's kind of like that. It just, some of it doesn't fit and some of it does. It's a weird case. But as I said, The film really drags as a result. More specifically, the first half. Now, I heavily enjoy the second half of the film. The second half of the film is a lot more enjoyable than the first half. There is a lot of fucking pointless ass shit in the first half of this film. The whole love triangle with the school superintendent and these two guys that are trying to get her to marry them is so pointless, so dumb. It does nothing to progress the plot, and it literally feels like it's trying to be another movie. That feels like it could have been in a separate film all on its own. And, in fact, if it wasn't a separate film all of its own, it would have been better than putting it into a movie about a swarm of killer bees. It could have been completely cut out, and we still would have had the same emotion towards this character. There's this one scene where this kid who loses his parents to the swarm, that's the first victims of the movie that we really see get killed by the swarm. He panics, and he drives through the city, and he crashes into this post. And the school teacher and those two guys go over and help him out. Now, that would have been a lot better, because what happens in the film is it's structured like this. Kid sees his parents die, drives off. Cut back to Michael Caine talking about they don't know where the swarm is. Cut to this random ass shit with her in the love triangle thingy, which the lines are completely corny. Like, I like the theme of this flower thing. Love. And I'm like, oh god, fuck. Those. It's so poorly. It's poorly. It would be one thing if it was well written. It's not. It's horribly written. The lines are all corny. And the girl who plays Miss Houston, who is the school superintendent, she's a very competent actress. But man, is she ditzy in this film. She's like, oh, Clarence. Or she'd be like, oh, Mr. Tuttle, I guess I'll have to make a decision. I'm already married to this school. That's one of the lines in the movies. I'm married to this school. It's so pathetic. But anyways, that's how it's structured, is that after Michael Caine talking, it then immediately cuts to this whole love triangle thingy, and then the kid driving through the city, and them going to rescue him. It would have worked so much better if they actually just cut from Michael Caine to the kid driving and crashing and Miss Houston going out and saving him. It would have worked just as well and would have been paced better. Again, it's like a hiccup in the movie. I have several more cases of this coming up, don't worry. There's also this scene at the diner where one of the guys who's in love with her talks. Again, serves zero purpose to the plot, and all it does is introduce, there's this pregnant woman who is a waitress whose boyfriend died at the beginning of the movie. He died at the beginning of the movie because this missile complex got swarmed with bees, and they were all stung and they died. And this is establishing his girlfriend. And it actually establishes her in a previous scene where you hear Michael Caine is listening back to the tapes because everything's always recorded in those missile silos, even to today. So he's listening back to it, and you hear her boyfriend talking about her. And then it shows her. The next scene shows her. You didn't really need it, though, in order to establish that that's her. Because it happens later on. There's a scene where she's essential later on in the movie, where the bees actually attack the town. And Michael Caine and Catherine Ross wind up running into the diner, and she's there, and she helps them out. That would have been just as fine to introduce her there. This scene has zero purpose to the plot whatsoever. It's literally just filler. It could have been cut and the pacing would have been better because the scene after that is way more important than that piece of fucking shit we have to sit through. And the scene is almost 5 minutes. Almost 5 minutes of this pointless ass dialogue that makes zero... that all it does, because none of these characters are really essential to the film, all it does is establish that the asshole who runs it is a coward. The asshole who runs the store is a coward, which is foreshadow, which I'll get into the foreshadow. There's a lot of foreshadow in this movie, but it's a foreshadow to him locking himself in the freezer and letting Michael Caine, Catherine Ross, and a pregnant girl die or leave them to fend on their own in a different scene, and establish it, and the scene also establishes the pregnant woman. We don't need it. We don't. Because we understand what their characters are in the scene where the bees attack the town. We don't need it here. I don't give a shit. That's my problem. I don't give a shit. I want to see Michael Caine, Henry Fonda, and a bunch of other people try to solve the bee problem. I don't fucking care about the flower festival. I don't fucking care about the diner. I don't fucking care about this guy who's in love with Miss Houston. I don't give a flying fuck. But this movie, but the first half of the film just focuses on it. It just drives in. It's like in this review, if suddenly I went on a tangent about how much, I don't know, I hate life. It would make, you're not here to listen to me bitch about life. You're here to listen to me bitch about a movie called The Swarm. It would just serve as a hiccup in the review. That is the film in a nutshell. That's the first half of the film. And then on top of that, this love triangle even goes... After the bees attack the town, there's a scene where the general, played by Richard Widmark, who's awesome in this movie, he evacuates the town, and everybody gets on this train to be transported to Houston, I believe. Now, then the bees swarm the train, and the train is derailed and blows up. It's a very fun sequence, even though there's no reason why the train would explode. I mean, fly off the rails, yes, but explode, no. But, I mean, it's a fun scene, but unfortunately there's a whole hiccup scene. I'm going to call that hiccup every time those scenes come in that are pointless. I'm going to call them hiccup moments. There's a hiccup moment because, again, it goes to the love triangle. Now, Miss Houston and those two guys wind up dying in that scene. And it makes me wonder and scratch my head because Miss Houston and those guys did nothing to progress the plot whatsoever. They didn't. And I'll get into more why a little later when I get into the logic leaps of this movie. But there's scenes where like they're arguing over who's carrying her luggage. They sit down next to her and they're playing cards. I don't care. I don't care about her. I don't care about her two boyfriends. I just care about Michael Caine trying to defeat the bees. Please show me more of him trying to deal with the bees. Luckily, that's actually all of what the second half of the film is them dealing with the bees, actually. So, that's at least a plus side. So, when I watched Miss Houston and the others die, I was like, yes! Thank you! Now we can focus on more important people. And the entire opening of the film, it's a nearly 10-minute sequence. I'm not kidding. It's a 10-minute sequence where it's these guys going into that missile complex and finding the dead bodies. Oh God, does it just drag? Because they go, first off, it's beautifully shot. I gotta give them at least props for that at least it looked nice. But they go into the missile complex and they go into the main communications room through the elevator. And you see that they're all dead. And they walk in and they're just all dead. So in case you don't know that they're dead, they decided to then introduce the lead or one of the side characters. He played one of the lead scientists on Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and it bugs me that I can't remember his name. However, he's a good actor. And he's a major in this film, so I'm just going to call him the Major. The Major takes off his mask and looks around, right? It would have been great if all of a sudden he just pulled out, after he looks around, he just pulls out a walkie-talkie and calls in for Richard Widmark to come in, and the coast is clear. But no, what it does, it has to show his reaction to seeing all the dead bodies by intercutting with more lingering shots of the dead bodies that we just fucking saw coming into the room. So in case you don't know that they're dead, they're fucking dead. And it's because of that the scene just goes on and on and on and on and on, and I'm like, move on already. We know that they're dead. Keep moving. What's going on? What killed them? We know that they're dead. Thank you, Irwin Allen. All right, we know we're dead. Or okay. All right, cut to something else. All right, we get it. They're dead. They're fucking dead. And no, they just Keep focusing on it. I don't get it. Then there's also a scene where, like, Henry Fonda is looking through the dead bodies from the complex. And the Major asks him, you don't seem too... it was like too surprised. He's questioning him because they think that they're doing something to go against the Army or the Air Force or something like that. They think that they're working against the Air Force and that they caused it. Even though that plot goes nowhere, by the way. Because there's an entire scene where Richard Widmark goes up to the Major and says, follow Michael Caine's character, I think he's up to no good. That goes nowhere. You think that that's going to be a big part of, like, a side plot of the film? No, it goes fucking nowhere. But Henry Fonda says the line, I wouldn't be too happy around all these dead bodies. And it shuts the Major up. Granted, Henry Fonda gave a good performance in that scene, but there's zero purpose. Yes, we fucking know that they're dead. Just start examining them so we can progress the plot. Please! Then there's a scene, there's a scene that's kind of integral to the plot because it establishes a few characters. However, it could have been cut in half. There's a scene where all the scientists get together in the missile complex and Michael Caine is talking to them. It goes on for about... They talk literally for about 8 minutes of the film. 8 minutes. The scientists are discussing what type of bee the swarm is. I don't care. I don't care what fucking kind of bee it is. What you should be looking at are the facts. Here's what they are. Here's what they've done. This is the type of venom that's in them. It shouldn't matter what kind of bee they're, even if they're the mutated bees or the African killer bees or the ones from Brazil or fucking honeybees. It shouldn't matter. What they should be looking at is focusing on the situation as it is. But no, they spend minutes upon minutes upon minutes, not just in this scene, mainly in this scene, but in scenes that follow this part as well, and before that, they're focusing on what type of bee it is. I don't care. Neither did the audience. I don't fucking care. Deal with the situation. You're wasting precious fucking time. I'm thinking, like, in terms of context of the movie now. You're wasting precious time debating on what the fuck kind of bee it is when you should be looking at the situation on its own front. I guess that's not computing in Michael Caine's brain. Because, by God, we need to know that it's the African killer bee. And even when he shows up on the main view screen what type of bee it is because of the way how the wings are shaped and how many veins are in the wings. Even then, people don't believe him, and I'm like, fuck, just move on. We get it. They're killer bees. Deal with the situation, please. God. God! I need more of that. And there's another scene where this goes back to the love triangle thing, where Mr. Tuttle, who is one of the girls, yeah, he's practically a girl, one of the guys who's in love with Miss Houston, goes and is going to give flowers to her, and he waits in the schoolhouse with all these children running around him. This one pissed me off the most. This scene takes place right after Michael Caine and Catherine Ross see the swarm heading for the town. It's a very action-packed scene. And what this scene does, him waiting to give the flowers to Miss Houston and him even presenting the flowers to Miss Houston, brings the pacing to a screeching halt. What would have been better, and what actually happened in the theatrical version, is that right after Michael Caine says, oh my God, the swarm is heading for the town, they turn around in their car and head for the town, it cuts immediately to them running into the police station saying the swarm is heading here. That would have kept the action moving. That would have kept the entire plot moving. That would have kept things moving. It would have kept the audiences on the edge of their seats. It would have been like, oh my God, this is actually going to happen. Oh my God, what's going to happen to the town? The suspense would keep building. But no. We had to focus on this fucking love triangle. There's another thing, there's another love story in this film that's kind of hidden. but it's there, and it's actually, I don't hate it. I actually don't mind it whatsoever. There's a love story between Michael Caine's character and Catherine Ross's character. It's not terrible, as I just stated. It's not too bad. I've seen a lot worse, trust me. And I tolerate it because they wind up actually forming a bond. It's not like they meet each other and it's like love at first sight. No, when they actually meet each other, it's just offhand. It's just like, oh, I can help you. And she's like, okay, thank you. And they're focusing on saving these these 4 people who survived the missile complex attack. And they're just focusing on that, and they just happen to be working together. Michael Caine winds up saying this line where he goes, I like being with you. You're the one positive thing that's happened to me through all this. I actually like that line because there's actually no romantic connotation for that whatsoever, both in their performances and both in how they look at each other. First off, Michael Caine is a phenomenal actor, and including in this, he actually does give a good performance in this, like Henry Fonda, and Catherine Ross does too, for the most part. Again, that line was said more friendly than nothing, and it actually was. I thought it was actually a good moment. And then they see the bees, but it makes the scene towards the end, because what happens is Catherine Ross's character gets stung, and if you get stung once, it's like, blah, you're like out of it. But if you get stung more than that, you die. Which is very frightening. That's actually terrifying. But anyways, she got stung and she goes into a relapse because this is actually true. I found out that if you survive a killer bee attack, you'll be fine, and then it'll come back and you will die. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There is a relapse period, and she goes through that relapse because she only gets stung once, so she's not going to die, but she goes through a relapse. And he stays by her side the entire time, because throughout all of this, Henry Fonda's character died in a previous scene, and that was kind of like Michael Caine's mentor, and then he has her, who's kind of like the one friend he has. And the fact that Henry Fonda's character died in a previous scene, and now she's really sick, you just see him kind of come apart, and that's a good thing. I feel like they approached it well. I feel like it was done well, and Michael Caine's performance sells it, genuinely sells it. So I could say that I gave a shit about their relationship. I did, and that's more than I could say for a lot of things. You see, another thing with the love story between Michael Caine and... That's really crooked. See, another thing with the love story between Michael Caine and Catherine Ross's character is that it's not a major part of the plot. That's the biggest part of why I like it. And, in Submersion of Japan, the love story wound up being a big part of the plot. I didn't like that. Stuff along those lines, excuse me. Here, it's not a major part of the plot. What takes precedence with them is definitely them trying to figure out the whole deal with the bees, which is what it should have been, and I'm glad that's what Irwin Allen mainly focused on with them. And it's always mainly plot-driven with them. It's not so much about the character. Another thing that really bugs me about this film is the slow motion. Now, I'm actually a big fan of slow motion. I actually enjoy it a lot. But I like it when it's done like Sam Peckinpah. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that is, Peckinpah uses a lot of angles and a lot of quick cuts, and it's all done in slow motion. And it looks fantastic. I mean, watch The Wild Bunch. It's fantastic. But here, the shots linger. The slow motion, especially whenever the bees attack, all of a sudden it'll switch to slow motion. And I get why he did it, was that he wanted it to be driven home. I understand why Irwin Allen did it. He wanted there to be an impact. He wanted there to be, something like that. But unfortunately, a lot of shots linger, and it's kind of awkward. An example of this is when Miss Houston is reacting to seeing all the children getting killed by the bees. She's like, oh, it's so bad. And then there's another one where Catherine Ross, she's hallucinating in the city of Houston, and it's slow motion, and she screams. She's like, oh. It's so funny. Like, it's unintentionally funny. It's pretty bad. it's really bad. Something else that I wish that was in this film is that whenever somebody gets stung by a bee, you never really see the sting itself. And I know why. It's because, you know, well, we can't actually sting people on here. No, that's not what I meant. I meant, like, makeup-wise. Like, when Catherine Ross gets stung, she's perfectly fine. They never put a mark on the back of her neck or anything for us to see. In fact, the one that bugs me the most is at the beginning of the film when they're finding all those dead bodies. When they go in there, they're perfectly fine. They are. They're just plain dead. There's no makeup on their face or anything to show, like, the little dots or wherever where a bee got sting. Now, if you don't know what a bee sting looks like, it looks pretty nasty. It'll whelp up. There's a big black dot in the center. It's nasty looking. And with a killer bee, I imagine it'd be a lot worse. So the fact that there is no makeup kind of bugged me. You know, it would have added another level of realism to this film, because this film is trying to be as realistic as possible. It fails miserably, but it's at least trying to be as realistic as possible. And then there's no makeup to kind of prove a point, and that's unfortunate, but that's just a minor detail. Now, this film focuses on the science of the bees a lot, and how they're trying to make an antidote, and how they're going to scientifically stop the bees without harming any of the other wildlife in the area. And it makes it look like the scientists are going to save the day, because 90% of the film ultimately focuses on them. It focuses on Henry Fonda's character, it focuses on Michael Caine, it focuses on this other doctor character who are studying these bees. And it makes it look like they are going to save the day. However, in the end, that does not stop the bees at all. In the end, it's an explosion that kills the bees out in the Gulf of Mexico, where they dump oil or gasoline in the water, and they drive the bees there with this sonic sound that matches their mating call, and it drives all the bees there, and then they just light it up, and a lot of the bees burn. So, in the end, that means all that science bullshit that we've been listening to for the other 90% of the film was for nothing. And that it never mattered. So that means all that character development, all of that stuff that we focused on with Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda even dies in the name of trying to save the day, and that ending makes it that he died for nothing. That all of that hard work that they put in didn't do shit. That's a problem. That's almost as bad as when it turns out in the end that it was nothing but a dream, or that an entire thing was nothing but a dream. There's a show where it's like this entire show was just developed, and it turns out that all the characters were created in the mind of this autistic kid. I forgot the name of the show, but those kind of endings piss me off, and this kind of ending is no exception. Where it turns out that all the stuff that we've been focusing on this entire time are really, it was all being for nothing. And that annoys me, and this is no exception. The film, here's my biggest problem with the film, and I mean it. Well, it's not really, no, my biggest problem is all those scenes with that just don't need to be there. This leads to, what I'm going to talk about next, leads to a lot of fun with the film, and I mean a lot of fun. This film has a shit ton of logic leaps. One of my favorites that just makes me laugh hysterically, and I'm going to get into all of them, and I mean all of them that I saw later on, actually in just a little bit, just to list them all off, but one that takes the cake for me as the all-time one is when Richard Widmark's character goes up to Michael Caine and says, "You captured a bunch of bees. What if the bees come back and want to take them, and want to take revenge for us taking the bees?" And Michael Caine says, "Are you actually giving the bees human emotions?" And he says, "I treat all my enemies with equal intelligence." Richard Widmark says that. That is the stupidest goddamn thing I've ever heard. just thinking of it makes me laugh. It seriously is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard uttered in a movie. that Richard Widmark would think that. They're bees, damn it. I mean, yeah, they're killer bees and stuff like that, and they're a huge menace, but they're just bees. Why would you even think that that would make any logical sense? Did Richard Widmark even think about what he was saying? But I'm going to start up the counter here for all the things that make no goddamn sense in this film, and all the possible logic leaps. Starting with one. Why does Michael Caine just stand in the background and doesn't explain himself or warn about the bees when all the army guys show up? He just stands there and just acts very cryptic. And I'm like, you could be explaining this thing the entire time. It could have avoided the accident with the 2 helicopters, which is fucking hilarious to do. How did the bees... I can understand why the bees... Never mind. That's actually next. Number 2. How the hell could a swarm of bees take down a helicopter? I can understand a plane because it gets sucked into the engines and it screws up the engines, but the helicopter is a propeller. The propeller would just slice through the bees. How in the name of God would it cause a helicopter to not only crash but explode? That makes no goddamn sense. Number 3, if Widmark's character just heard and saw on radar that the swarm of bees took down 2 helicopters, why does he not believe Michael Caine when he says that they're African killer bees, or bees at all for that matter? Number 4, how did the boy see the swarm of bees by the tree when his parents died from 10 feet away, but not his parents who were less than half that distance away from them? Number 5, why, in the name of fuck, would the President of the United States place Michael Caine in charge of what is clearly a military operation? It makes no logical sense to place him as the head of a group that has to do something like this. What would make more sense is if he was placed as a subordinate, or if he was placed as like a number 2 under Richard Widmark's character. Now, of course, this was the Jimmy Carter administration, so that actually makes a lot more sense now that I'm thinking of it. Number 6. Why the fuck would Catherine Ross and Michael Caine abandon the ICBM hospital, that's where the missile compound was, full of survivors who could all account what exactly happened and given them valuable information about the toxins and the potency of the bee stings for the little boy in the small town? They completely abandoned their post to save this little boy, or to help this little boy, when they have all their answers right there. It just proves that they already know the swarm is moving. Number 7. How could Michael Caine even speculate that the bees were eating the plastic in a public park where people would litter all the time? How doesn't he know a person did that and tore up the cup instead of the bees? Because he immediately says that the bees tear up the cups and are using them to line their hive. How doesn't he know, because they were in a public park, that people did that? How can he assume that the bees did that? 8. How in the fuck did an entire army search team equipped with aerial surveillance miss the massive beehive by the tree when those little kids found it with no problem whatsoever? The boy's name is Paul, knew where they were when they saw them, granted. But why didn't Caine ask the boy where the hive was in the first place? Still, a military military search mission missed something that gigantic, and it was right in front of them? I find that very hard to believe. Bin Laden should have hid there for all we knew. Number 9. Why is Henry Fonda here checking the toxicity of the dead bodies? He only states what Michael Caine already knows, that the war is here. Quote, the war is here. Move on, do something, and take action. Number 10. Why does it matter what species of bees they are? Why don't they just look at the bodies and begin to collaborate with what they know? Several scenes are dealt with Michael Caine's character calling them a mutant species. Of African bee. So why does it matter what kind they are if they're mutant? They should focus on what they know. and combat the situation with that information. Stop debating and do something. Several scenes are devoted to this, and it just wastes complete and utter time. Number 11. Is one watching or on duty at the hospital when the little kid, Paul, escapes? He just walks out. He wasn't even a voluntary patient. He was put in there involuntarily, which means that he could not leave without a bunch of shit-ass paperwork saying that he was allowed to leave. Number 12. Why the fuck don't the bees just wait for them? They just attack and then they leave. The bees don't do that. What I mean by that, Paul gets these two of his friends to go out and they throw Molotov cocktails at the bees. And they hide in these trash cans. Right? And the bees swarm them, and then all of a sudden the bees just go away by reversing the footage. Bees don't do that. I'm sorry, bees don't do that. Bees will hunt you down, okay? My father told me a tale where he pissed off a bunch of bees, and he actually had to run about a mile before the bees finally gave up chasing him. A mile. Number 13. When Michael Caine sees the swarm, how does he determine which way they're headed? Because they're clearly going in 3 different directions. Number 14. Why did Miss Houston, the principal and superintendent of the school, wait to inform everyone of the swarm until they were attacked in the school grounds? In fact, why are all the children unattended in the first place with such a crisis at hand? It would be one thing if this was high school, where they're all teenagers, but this is clearly a elementary school, like kindergarten through 5th grade elementary school. Why would she wait to inform them of all the teachers of something so drastically important as a massive swarm of killer bees that are heading for their town? Number 15. With the attack, why didn't the mayor do anything to prepare for such a disaster, like tell the people to stay indoors or be prepared to move at a moment's notice? People are just going about their daily lives and with literally death just a couple of miles up the goddamn road. Number 16. Why the fuck didn't the military do anything to help these people when they are stationed just outside the town? Why isn't the military there to help with evacuations? Why isn't the military there helping them? Why isn't the National Guard in there? Why aren't the police doing anything with just a big crisis, as they explain in the movie, just outside their town? They do nothing. They could have helped with evacuations, or even warned the town the swarm was headed their way fucking sooner. Nope, they do nothing. They leave it to Michael Caine and Catherine Ross, when they can clearly see the swarm on radar. Number 17. Why could Michael Caine leave the base and find the little boy when there is clearly more important issues going on? There is no goddamn sense why he would leave that base. He does it for Catherine Ross, he says, or because Paul is a part of his responsibility because he was stung and therefore he's kind of like a case. But there's plenty of more people he could look at, like, those people in the ICBM base. Why doesn't he stay there? In fact, he's a general. He should be there. He's kind of neglecting his duties. Yeah, way to go, Jimmy Carter. Way to call it on that. 18. Why should the authorities leave all those dead bodies in black bodysuits out in a blistering sun at the end of the attack in the middle of the summer? They have nowhere to put them, really? They're just stacking them up in those black body bags out there? Jesus Christ, it must stink. How could bees make a train explode? Like, I can understand why it went off the tracks because they stung the guy and he fell back and hit the acceleration button, but how the fuck does that make a train explode? Number 20. Why doesn't Richard Widmark continue to press the president of shutting down the nuclear reactor? And what happens is that the bees are heading towards this nuclear reactor and they can't shut it down because it powers Houston or some areas around Houston. And so Richard Widmark says, I'll press the president, and the president will sign it and do it in executive order. And then there's this environmentalist who is with them, and he says, oh no, I fought them many times. I can try to talk some sense to them to shut them down. And they're like, okay. So they don't even bother to call the president, and they just send him, like, yeah, he's going just this one environmentalist, no less, who is the arch nemesis of the people who both work there and own the nuclear power plant, tries to shut them down. It's gonna fail. That makes no goddamn sense. Number 21. Why would you want to? Why would you want to use close-range flamethrowers in close contact with vehicles and gas stations when they're trying to kill the bees while they swarm Houston? I like the method. Start burning the bees. That actually makes sense. But they're using close-range flamethrowers. And they're specifically next to gas stations and stuff. Or like, do you want a death warrant? That makes no goddamn sense. Number 22. Why would you use your flamethrowers on the top floor of a skyscraper when you're still in it? Let that just sink in. And finally, number 23. How did Michael Caine escape the Houston HQ when the bees swarmed it without getting stung once? Everyone else did and died, and that included Richard Widmark. Why didn't he get stung once? I guess it's because he's Michael Caine and he's Alfred. I don't know. Finally, on the things that I kind of like about this movie. I've always been a fan of foreshadowing in films, and I've just barely started kind of getting into it. I wish I got into it more. But there's something that I like in this film is that there is a shit ton of foreshadowing. And I listed a bunch of examples of this. One of the ones is the kid with the all-day sucker. That was one of them, and he winds up dying in the thing, even though that didn't really serve any point to the plot. Paul, the kid Paul, who loses his parents at the beginning of the film, whenever he sweats, that means he's feeling the effect of the stings. And everybody sweats when they feel because their heart starts pounding like crazy. And what happens is the kid all of a sudden gets cleaned up and then he starts sweating again. It was foreshadowing of the relapse. The siren at the missile complex, Michael Caine listens to it for a long moment. And when he's listening back to all the people in the missile base getting stung, you hear that siren. And that's what's used at the end of the film to drive the bees out of Houston. The tin trash cans in the park. When Paul's parents get killed, they are shown in the background when the parents are killed. And then it winds up saving the kids later when they throw the Molotov cocktails at the bees. The man at the base talking about his pregnant wife, she turns out to be the woman that helps Catherine Ross and Michael Caine when the bees attack the small town. I thought that was a nice little touch. This film is full of foreshadow. It's full of things that wind up kind of like interconnecting, and I do like that. And granted, quite a few of them would have been lost with the 2-hour cut, but I don't care. I'm out. There still would have been enough for my liking. Another thing that I like about this film is that this film is big. I can't deny that. This film was not a small B-grade production. This was an A-grade movie. And even if they couldn't actually show it, they talk about it. For example, when the nuclear power plant explodes, it says 32,000 people were killed. An entire city is shut down. That's the city of Houston. You see the busy streets of Houston's brought to a complete halt, and then people using flamethrowers at night. It's actually really well shot and very atmospheric. And the music by Jerry Goldsmith is also very atmospheric. And an entire town is killed. This movie is absolutely gigantous. Another thing that I like about it is this reminds me a lot of War of the Worlds. The protagonists try everything in their arsenal to stop these bees. They try smoke, poison pellets, gas, fire even. Nothing works. And I was going to say nuke them, see what happens, but a nuclear power plant exploded and that didn't stop them. So it makes the bees very, very antagonizing. And on top of that, there's just so many. They're so tiny, but there's so many. They're hard to see and everything like that you're just overwhelmed immediately, and it is very frightening. Other thing I like about this movie is that a lot of films with big stars like this, they're afraid to kill people off. No, in this film, everyone fucking dies. Miss Houston dies, her 2 love interests dies, Paul dies, General Widmark dies, the Major dies, Henry Fonda dies. Everyone dies. Even Emperor Shaddam IV. Yes, that was a Dune reference because Jose Ferrer plays shot on the fourth in Dune, whatever. Another thing that I like is that Slim Pickens is in this movie, and I've always been a fan of Slim Pickens. I know he's known for his comedy, but he played a role in Pat Garrett and Billy Kid, which ironically is a Sam Peckinpah movie. And he gave a phenomenal performance, and that wasn't a comedy. That movie's not a comedy whatsoever, and he didn't play it for laughs whatsoever. It's an absolutely great performance, and here, his performance is just as good, and I mean that. It is an excellent performance that he gives, because what happens is he's being shown his dead son in the facility. He's looking for his dead son, and Widmark shows him his dead son, and the music is great, the pacing is great, and the way how you see Slim Pickens just break down, and him when he walks in and sees all the dead bodies. I love how he takes off his hat. To me, it's a great scene, and I think Slim Pickens is an extremely underrated actor. Henry Fonda, when his death scene is phenomenal. Just to prove how wonderful of an actor Henry Fonda is. When Henry Fonda's trying out the serum, it's genuinely suspenseful with all the quick cuts, how Henry Fonda looks, how the music is done. He looks genuinely suspenseful, and great editing in that sequence. Absolutely wonderful. And Henry Fonda's acting is absolutely top notch. The look of utter defeat on his face when his serum fails and he knows he's going to die. Now, I love Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda is an extremely good actor. And this is no exception. I mean, just the look on his face conveyed it all without any words. He doesn't actually say he's going to die. He just knows that he's going to wind up passing away. And another thing that I like about it is that Michael Caine is trying so hard, and succeeds at times, to make a good performance out of a bad movie. And I usually point to the scenes where he's trapped in the building in Houston, where he's sitting over Catherine Ross's body while she's trying to recover from the relapse, and he's praying for her. Michael Caine gives a genuinely great performance in this film, in a lot of the scenes that he's in. There's a couple scenes where he's shouting at Richard Widmark that I laugh because of how corny it is, but I can tell he's genuinely trying to act in this film. He's not just doing it... Well, he did do it just for a paycheck. This film and Jaws the Revenge were the two films, but he really did for a paycheck. But at least he was trying, which a lot of actors really wouldn't. He just has such a look of loss and defeat on his face. It's absolutely fantastic. He does a great job. And the final thing that I want to talk about in this film is the music score by Jerry Goldsmith. It's Goldsmith. What can I say? That man has not made a bad score, in my opinion. So that goes without saying. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was my very lengthy review for Irwin Allen's disaster bomb, The Swarm. Do I recommend it? Yeah, I actually do. If you have literally nothing else to do and you need to drink a bottle of wine and get rid of it, this is the movie for you. If you hate this movie, I really understand why. If you love this movie, I really understand why. It's so bad it's good, at least in my opinion. And yeah, go check it out. It's fun. The least you can say is that the second half of the film is really fun, and that there's some over-the-top moments in it that are absolutely ridiculous. But I give The Swarm a 2.5 out of 4 stars. I was going to give it a 2, but with the second viewing of the film, I found myself enjoying it more. So I'm going to give the film a 2.5 out of 4 stars. Well, I hope you enjoyed this rather lengthy review. I apologize for the length. I just had a lot I wanted to say about this film. Do go on Facebook, like AM Productions, like my new film, Which Way They Walk. There still isn't a release date, but we continue filming in September. So do stay tuned for more information about that. Like the Godzilla Saga on Facebook, like the Sons of Serizawa Network on Facebook. We have a lot of Facebook. So hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me what you think about this film. I'd like to know if you hate it or if you genuinely think it's so bad it's good like I do. Do that. Do that. Stay tuned for more reviews. And this is Adam Noyes of AM Productions saying, bees, bees, millions of bees.